Do you love spy books, movies, and TV? Then the Spybrary podcast is for you. Since 2017, host Shane Whaley and Spybrary field agents around the world dispatch reviews and interviews with authors, historians, and fellow spy fans. We discuss everything from John le Carré, Len Dayton, Paul Viddich, Graham Greene, Mick Herron, Charles Cumming, Ben McIntyre, and many more. Spybrary is available on all good podcast apps and at spybrary.com.
It's a brush pass, quick and simple.
You are listening to Brush Pass on Spybrary. Quick reviews sent in by spy fans for spy fans.
This is Spybrary and Chris Lueloff coming to you from the great Midwestern state of Wisconsin, Brew City Station. Today I'd like to tell you about an author who doesn't get a lot of notice in the Spybrary, but one who is becoming one of my personal favorites. I'm talking about the late Bill Granger, author of some 28 novels, 13 of which are spy novels featuring American agent Peter Devereaux, the November Man. So, who was Bill Granger, and what can I tell you about him? William F. Granger was born on June 1st, 1941 in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin, but spent most of his childhood and most of his life in Chicago, Illinois. Granger graduated from Chicago's DePaul University in 1963 with a bachelor's degree in English. He served in the U.S. Army from 1963 to 1965 and moonlighted as a copyboy for the Washington Post, where he met his future wife, Lori Meschke, who was working for the Post as an intern. Bill Granger worked as a reporter and/or columnist at various times for the UPI, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, and the Chicago Daily Herald, as well as covering the Belfast Civil War in 1971 for Newsday, the Washington Post, and the LA Times news services. He also taught journalism classes at Columbia College in Chicago. It was in 1978 that Granger became a novelist. The Chicago Sun-Times sister paper, the Chicago Daily News, folded, and the staffs were merged, and Granger lost his job. Needing to put food on the table and a roof over his family's head, he began writing a novel. He used his time in Ireland and his knowledge of the Troubles in his plot for that first book, The November Man, published in 1979. Just weeks before, British First Earl Louis Mountbatten, Royal Navy officer, the last Viceroy of India, and the first Governor General of independent India, was killed by IRA terrorists. The plot of The November Man and the death of Mountbatten and others aboard his 29-foot fishing boat were eerily similar and caused a bit of a sensation at the time. As Bill Granger himself put it in the afterword of a later edition of The November Man, within 24 hours of Lord Mountbatten's assassination by elements of the Irish Republican Army terrorist group, The November Man became internationally famous. I sat in my kitchen in a suburb of Chicago and received calls morning and night from around the world. There were live interviews on the phone with morning DJs in Sydney, Australia, and post-midnight calls from the Glasgow Herald. The calls from reporters all asked the same question in different ways. How did you foretell the death of Louis Mountbatten in your novel? I did not. My book had been based, as are all the others in the series, on some reporting and my own interviews and experience. The world of intelligence, espionage, and terrorism explored in the November Man novels is a glass turned to the real and quite shadowy world beneath the consciousness of most of us. The November Man is Peter Devereaux, an agent of a small American intelligence agency, R Section, or simply the Section. As the story goes, the Section was formed following the Bay of Pigs disaster as an alternative agency to help keep the CIA honest. Deveraux himself was recruited from Columbia University, where he taught Asian politics and history during the Kennedy administration. After his training, Deveraux's first assignment was in Southeast Asia to analyze the growing situation in Vietnam. He was pulled from Vietnam in 1967 after filing a report on the coming Tet Offensive, which the powers that be chose to ignore. They refused to return Deveraux to the region again, and he found himself assigned to the West thereafter. The moniker, the November Man, is not actually dwelled on within the books. November is his code name with the Section, and it is noted it is appropriate for his appearance and chill, bare existence. Indeed, Deveraux is described as the human embodiment of the month of November. His hair, a mixture of gray and black, his eyes a piercing marble gray, his face lined and his expression cold and wintry. Fans of author Mark Greaney may be amused that Deveraux is actually referred to as the Gray Man. Maybe that's where Greaney got the idea. Deveraux is not a pleasant man. He likes no one, trusts no one, and is always on the verge of walking off the job. In The November Man, Deveraux is approached by his boss, Hanley, and is requested to travel to Scotland to find out what devastating information one of their assets has for them, and is requesting $30,000 for. The book takes place in Scotland, Ireland, England, Canada, and the U.S., and is about the aforementioned plot to assassinate a member of the royal family. Schism, the second book in the series, was published in 1982. A true globetrotting adventure, this one has segments in Bangkok, Moscow, Washington, D.C., Vatican City, Maryland, New York City, Langley and Front Royal, Virginia, Clearwater, Florida, and Green Bay, Wisconsin. The plot centers around a Catholic priest, missing since the Vietnam War and long thought dead, who staggered out of the Cambodian jungle after 20 years. What happened to him during his absence? What does he have to tell the world? Is he a spy, and if so, for who? Can his knowledge help or hurt the church? Inquiring minds want to know. His resurrection strikes a strong interest from the Americans, the Russians, the Vatican, and of course the global press. Who better to send into the fray from our section than Peter Devereaux, who, with his knowledge of Southeast Asia at the time when Father Leo Tunney went missing, may be able to unravel the mystery. The third book in the series is The Shattered Eye, also published in 1982. Eye focuses on a cat-and-mouse game between U.S. and Soviet intelligence and whether or not a potential buildup of Soviet troops in Eastern Europe is real or misinterpreted information from a Russian computer simulation. The Shattered Eye in the title is the name of a Soviet operation to counter Hurricane, a NATO operation designed to protect Western Europe in the event of a Soviet invasion. As usual, the story jumps from city to city and country to country, including Washington, D.C., London, Moscow, and most prominently Paris, which is visited in present day, 1982, and also 1968 during the student worker revolt, which nearly caused the government of French President Charles de Gaulle to collapse and resulted in de Gaulle actually fleeing the country at one point. A great deal of the story is told through the relationship of our section operative William Manning and his lover Jean, a French spy. Their story flashes back to 1968 when she was a student and he was on assignment in Paris. In this book, Deveraux is now a free agent, having resigned from our section following the activities at the conclusion of Schism. Deveraux is solicited by his old boss Hanley and reluctantly takes the job. As a change of pace from the first two books, Deveraux doesn't make his appearance until about 100 pages in. To date, these are the only books in the series I have read. The November Man series did carry on for another 10 editions with some interesting titles such as Hemingway's Notebook, The Infant of Prague, Henry McGee is Not Dead, and The Man Who Heard Too Much. The final book in the series was Burning the Apostle, published in 1993. All books are currently available in nice-looking ebook editions at a reasonable cost. I was completely unaware of this author, this character, or this series until the release of the 2014 feature film The November Man, starring Pierce Brosnan in the title role. I did not see the film in the theater, but several months later when it was shown on a premium cable channel. I liked the film, and after I saw it, decided to check out the book. It was then that I found out the November Man film was not based on the book of the same name, but on the 7th book in the series, There Are No Spies. The movie edition of the book was renamed to match the film. So what about the first book in the series, the book that actually is titled The November Man? Well, they reissued that book too with a new title, Codename November. Got it? Yeah, it took me a minute too. The film is enjoyable. I think Brosnan is better as a seasoned, world-weary former spy than as Bond, although he is considerably older than the book version of Peter Devereaux. I think Brosnan was well cast and played the part closely to the literary version. I've not read the book the film was actually based on. Repeat after me. The November Man is based on There Are No Spies, so I do not know how faithful it is to the book. When I read my first November Man book, which is the actual book originally titled The November Man and not the book the movie is based on, I read it back to back with the Quiller memorandum. I felt as if I'd stumbled upon the two most cold, ruthless, and surliest spies in fiction. After reading 4 Quiller and 3 November Man books, I have not changed my mind. To me, Peter Devereaux is an American Quiller, and I wonder if that is what Bill Granger was going for when he created the character. Read them both and see if you agree with me. Whether you do or don't, I urge you to give the November Man series a try. I think it'll appeal to most Spybrarians. Now, getting back to Bill Granger. While he never became a household name, he was successful in both his fields of expertise, novelist and journalist. He won an Edgar Award in 1981 for Best Paperback Original Mystery for Public Murders, a police procedural set in Chicago. He wrote a number of nonfiction books as well, including 2 books on Chicago politics, each which he co-wrote with his wife. Lords of the Last Machine, the story of politics in Chicago, and Fighting Jane, Mayor Jane Byrne and the Chicago Machine. Bill Granger continued writing as both a novelist and columnist until the late 1990s, when he tragically suffered a series of strokes, which robbed him of his memory and his ability to write or even read. Bill Granger spent his final years in a veterans hospital in Manteno, Illinois, where he passed away on April 22, 2012, at the age of 70. He left behind his wife of 45 years, 1 son, and a lot of former colleagues who remember him for the speed and skill with which he could turn breaking news into a hard-hitting news story, and the ease at which he could balance his career as a newspaperman with one as a prolific writer of fiction. It's a shame he isn't better known. And that's all I have for you now, Spybrarians. As the world turns and grows ever closer to another cold and gray winter, I hope you will think of the cold and gray November Man and the hard-bitten journalist who gave him life, and maybe give one of his books a go. This is Spybrarian Chris Lueloff signing off from Brew City Station.
Can you pull off a brush pass? Send in your review to shane@spybrary.com.
Thanks for listening to the Spybrary podcast. You don't have to wait for the next episode. Join the conversation happening now at facebook.com/Spybrary and on Twitter @Spybrary. Mm-hmm.